Hello and welcome to Moments in History. I'm Linda Shenton-Matchett, author, speaker, and history geek. While researching my stories, I unearthed tons of intriguing historical information that doesn't end up in my books. So I've created this channel to share these tidbits with you. I really appreciate you stopping by. Today, I'm going to share with you about 3 more Hollywood actresses who served during World War II. Marie Magdalene Dietrich was born in Berlin on December 27, 1901. Her mother, Wilhelmina Elizabeth Josephine, was from a very affluent Berlin family who owned a jewelry and clockmaking company. Her father, Louis Erich Otto Dietrich, was a police lieutenant who died when Marlene was 7 years old. Her father's best friend, Edward von Loesch, a first lieutenant in the Grenadiers, courted and then married her mother in 1914. Unfortunately, he would die less than 2 years later in July of 1916 from injuries he sustained during the First World War. As a teenager, Marlene became very interested in theater and studied the violin. However, an injury to her wrist put the kibosh on those dreams of becoming a concert violinist. At some point, she found a job as a chorus girl in Berlin, and then in 1922 auditioned for Max Reinhardt's Drama Academy. She did not get selected, however, she was able to find work in his theaters as a chorus girl and occasionally playing small roles in some of his dramas. By this time, she had changed her name to Marlene by combining the beginning of her first name and with the end of her middle name. The following year, she got her film debut with a small part in the movie The Little Napoleon, with a second movie, Tragedy of Love, where she met her future husband, Rudolf Sieber. They married a few months later in a civil ceremony. She continued to work in movies and finally landed her breakthrough role of Lola Lola in Blue Angel. Because of the movie's international success, she was recruited by Paramount Pictures and moved to the United States in 1930. One source indicates the studio was trying to market Marlene as the German answer to MGM's Swedish star Greta Garbo. Between 1930 and 1935, Marlene starred in 6 films with director Joseph von Sternberg, who worked to create an image for her of a glamorous and mysterious femme fatale. At some point, she traveled to London, where she was approached by Nazi Party officials and offered lucrative contracts to return to Germany and work in their movie industry. She refused their offers and applied for U.S. citizenship as soon as she got back to the United States. Marlene was very outspoken about her political convictions and did all she could to support the war against Nazi Germany. She created a fund with director Billy Wilder and several other European refugees to help Jews and dissidents escape from Germany. In 1937, she donated her entire $450,000 salary from her movie Night Without Armor to help the refugees. In December 1941, the U.S. entered World War II, and she quickly got on board to help sell war bonds. She toured the U.S. from January of 1942 to September of 1943, reportedly appearing before 250,000 troops on the Pacific coast leg of her tour alone. She is thought to have sold more war bonds than any other star. During 1944-1945, she participated in USO tours in Europe and the Netherlands, eventually entering Germany. According to several of her performers, she traveled up to the front lines often to give her performances. Over the course of the war, she suffered from influenza and near frostbite on several occasions. In 1944, the Morale Operations Branch of the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA, initiated something called the Muzak Project, which included musical propaganda broadcasts designed to demoralize enemy troops. Marlene made several numerous recordings of songs in German for the project, including Lily Marlene, which was a favorite of soldiers on both sides of the war. When she was not on tour, she volunteered at the Hollywood canteen, serving meals and entertaining the troops. Marlene received the U.S. Medal of Freedom in November of 1947 for her, quote, extraordinary record entertaining troops overseas during the war, end quote, and the Legion d'Honneur by the French government for her wartime work. After the war and through the mid-1970s, she primarily worked as a cabaret artist. After her retirement, she moved to Paris, where she passed away on May 6, 1992, at the age of 90. Our second Hollywood actress is also foreign-born. Audrey Kathleen Hepburn came from an aristocratic family in Brussels. Her childhood years were spent in Belgium, England, and the Netherlands. She attended boarding school in Kent, England from 1936 to 1939, but with the outbreak of the war, she returned to the Netherlands. Her mother had been a Nazi supporter until two tragic family events. In 1942, her uncle Otto van Limburg-Striem was executed in retaliation for an act of sabotage by the resistance movement. Reports indicate he had not been involved in the act, but had been targeted simply because of his family's prominence in Dutch society. A short time later, Audrey's half-brother Ian was deported to Berlin to work in a German labor camp. To avoid the same fate, her other half-brother Alex went into hiding. By this time, Audrey was 12 years old, thought by some to be too young to make a difference. However, after meeting local resistance leader Dr. Hendrik Visser-Toft, she jumped in with 2 feet, literally. She could dance. Her celebrity as a ballerina for nearly 4 years at the Arnhem City Theater gave her the ability to be part of illegal musical performances at various by-invitation-only locations. These events were called Black Evenings, and they had first been introduced by musicians as a way to earn money after they were forced out of the Dutch mainstream by the Nazi Union of Artists. Eventually, these events helped raise funds in support of people who were hiding Jews and others across the Netherlands. They were known as Black Evenings because the windows were blacked out or darkened to ensure the Germans would not know of the activities going on inside. In a later interview, Audrey said, "I did indeed give various underground concerts to raise money for the Dutch resistance movement. I danced at recitals, designing the dances myself. I had a friend who played the piano, and my mother made the costumes. They were very amateurish attempts, but nevertheless at the time, when there was little entertainment, it amused people and gave them the opportunity to get together and spend a pleasant afternoon listening to music and seeing my humble attempts." The recitals were given in houses with windows and doors closed, and no one knew what was going on. Afterwards, money was collected and given to the Dutch underground. She went on to say, "Guards were posted outside to let us know when Germans approached." And she reported, "The best audiences I had ever made could not make a single sound at the end of my performance." In addition to the performances, she aided with the delivery of food to downed pilots who were being hidden and then spirited out of Holland. She also assisted the doctor in delivering messages. She spoke English fluently, whereas most of the young people within easy reach of the villages could not. Additionally, as a 15-year-old, she was considered safe by the German Green Police. Later, when the time came, she also helped shelter British paratroopers. During Operation Market Garden, the British 1st Airborne Division tried to secure the bridge at Arnhem. The event later immortalized in the 1974 book and 1977 movie, Bridge Too Far. Unfortunately, only a small force reached the bridge. Many were trapped. Some, however, managed to escape, and Audrey brought one of these paratroopers to her home to escape. After the war, Audrey moved to Amsterdam, then London to continue her ballet training, but was told that her height and weak constitution, because of the malnutrition she suffered during the war, meant she would probably never be a prima ballerina. Therefore, undeterred, she decided to focus on acting. She appeared in several small roles, and her first starring role came in Roman Holiday with Gregory Peck. She continued to do well in film, but also successfully appeared in stage performances. By 1967, she had semi-retired to raise her family, and she passed away of cancer on January 20th, 1993. Our last actress is Montana native Martha Raye. Born August 27, 1916, she entertained audiences on stage, television, and movies for over 60 years. She got her beginnings at the age of 3 in vaudeville and eventually made it to Broadway and then Hollywood by the 1930s. Her physical humor and her musical ability led her to performances alongside such greats as Steve Allen, Charlie Chaplin, Bing Crosby, W.C. Fields, Judy Garland, Bob Hope, and Rock Hudson. But when the U.S. entered World War II in December of 1941, she joined the fledgling USO. She traveled across the country until late October of 1942, when she partnered with fellow entertainers Kay Francis, Carol Landis, and Mitzi Mayfair for an overseas tour, which took them to England and North Africa. Their adventures were captured in the 1944 movie Four Jills in a Jeep. There's conflicting information about her medical training. Some sites claim she was an RN, others that she became a nurse's aide while she was in LA. Other sites claim that she had no training at all. However, what is true, in between shows, she was known to help military medical personnel in field hospitals, cleaning wounds, donating blood, preparing patients for surgery, and joking with those patients and staff to aid morale and relieve stress. After her colleagues returned home, Martha carried on herself until she caught yellow fever and became anemic and was forced to return to the U.S. in March of 1943. However, once her health recovered, she returned overseas and spent time in the Pacific Theater. When the Berlin airlift began in 1948, she flew to Germany to put on performances for soldiers and airmen. Wearing combat boots and standard issue fatigues, she would hitch a ride in a helicopter or in a Jeep to perform in front of audiences of every size, play cards with the men, share drinks and rations, and just offer a bit of home to anyone she met. She continued to serve in this way through the Korean War and eventually returned to the U.S., where she did very well in television. Then came the onset of the Vietnam War, and she again put on her fatigues and headed across the ocean to serve and entertain. She was so well loved, the 5th Special Forces Group made her an honorary Green Beret, and the Marines made her an honorary colonel. The Army jumped on board and made her an honorary lieutenant colonel, a rank she wore on her fatigue uniform when she went into the field. She personally answered hundreds of letters from military admirers and would take phone numbers home with her so she could call wives and parents to tell them how their sons and husbands were doing so far from home. Upon her death in 1994, special consideration was given for her to be buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Instead, it was requested and granted that she be buried with full military honors in the Fort Bragg home of the U.S. Army Special Forces, the first civilian woman to be so honored. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you'd like to learn even more history, please stop by my blog, found on my website at www.lindashentonmatchett.com. And please consider subscribing to my YouTube and Spotify channels, Moments in History, to see and hear new episodes that generally release on the 2nd and 4th Fridays of each month. Thank you for stopping by and have a great rest of your day.